Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Blake. We're continuing our study of the book of Daniel in chapter 10. So, just like chapter 7's on, chapter 10 doesn't occur in chronological order necessarily. This is going to be sometime within chapter 6 of some sort. It's one of those just random visions that he had, one of those kind of one offs that he's put in this book so that we could know about it. This basically starts off in the third year of King Cyrus in verse 1. So now King Cyrus, you consider in verse 1, he talks about in the third year. Now, in Ezra, if you go and read the book of Ezra, it'll start off by saying in the first year of King Cyrus. So this is actually 2 years afterwards. Ezra was kind of, the whole events of Ezra were happening. So when we look at this, consider that this is when all of the first kind of round of Jewish people were allowed to go back and start rebuilding the city that Cyrus was allowing them to be, or necessarily the temple, I guess. And if you read the book of Ezra, it shows actually how Ezra accounts for these Jewish people going back and rebuilding their temple. And then there's a lot of opposition around them. I mean, just tons of opposition. People in the surrounding areas, they've heard about certain things of past kings that have been overthrown by the Jewish people. And so none of those people want this to happen to them. And so they're putting a lot of pressure up against the Jewish people. And you know, Daniel would have known about this. Daniel being in the kind of authority in the kingdom that he was in, you know, he was in a leadership position, and so he would have known about this. He would have been hearing all the troubles and been, you know, part of his prayers would have went for them, you know. And so when we look at this, you know, consider the temple is trying to be built right now, and then also the bad guys, you know, they're trying to stop him, and yet Cyrus actually makes them pay for the building of some of this, the city and the wall and the temple and stuff. So a lot of things are happening to Israel right now, and Daniel is kind of, he's in a position he can't necessarily help them that much, but he is in a position where God is showing him what is going to be happening and what's happening even in the supernatural realm that we see on later down in chapter 10. And so as setting up for chapter 10, it's funny because not really anything happens. It's more setting up for something to happen. It's more setting up for a vision of Daniel to really be seen. And so Daniel is seeing some figures that he cannot explain. He's seeing some people that are talking to him that he's losing his strength by. But really, 10 sets us up for really chapter 11. But we're going to stay only in chapter 10 today. So chapter 11 is kind of leading, it's like the conversation doesn't even stop. It's just chapter 10 and chapter 11. It was divided just for sake of, you know, knowing where you're at in the Bible. So if you read the first, very last verse of chapter 10, the first verse of 11, you can tell the conversation basically keeps going. So just an interesting idea. So verses 1 to 2, it's was in the first 2 years, which, you know, the group of Israelites were going back to build the temple. And then verses 2 through 3 really, Daniel fasts, and he fasts in mourning for 3 weeks, 21 days, you know, no meat, no wine. He doesn't anoint himself at all, which could also indicate lotion. Some versions talk about kind of lotion himself because they were in a desert climate. So he made himself kind of uncomfortable for 21 days. And a lot of this is kind of where we get some of our Daniel fasting and stuff. But 21 days of just being not comfortable, you know, not having any delicacies, no, you know, no really sweets or anything. Just kind of a very simple fruit and veggies kind of diet, it seems. And so, but with no lotions and no meats and stuff, he would have been a little weak at first, but, you know, God helped him through it. But he's fasting, and we see that his mourning is really going along with his fasting. And, you know, when I was looking through, you know, different ideas about what he could have been mourning about, really, they're all consistently about the Jewish people. You know, he was mourning really about all of the oppression that his own people were going through in Judah, trying to rebuild the temple. You know, they had a king that finally was getting behind them and letting them, you know, do something, you know, with their heritage and what God had told them to do. But yet you see so much opposition from the people in the surrounding areas that, you know, they were really having a lot of pressure against them. So Daniel was probably mourning some of the things that he's hearing happening to his own people. And so take that in consideration. There's really good reason for that. And but he was trying to, and it talks about them experiencing the opposition in Ezra 4. So if you want to go back and read that. So In verses 4 through 6, we go on. It says that he saw a man just at the end of his fast, then the 21 days. There's this being that just kind of shows up to him. And there's some guys around him that cannot see this vision. They can't see what's going on, but somehow they feel like this fear and this trembling overtake them, even though they can't see what Daniel is seeing. And so they just fled. They just kind of, they lose heart, it almost says. In verses 7 through 9, the men were with Daniel. They didn't see it, and they said that it made them tremble, and they ran and hid. And so Daniel himself lost all of his strength, and his appearance even changed. Daniel fell down into a deep sleep. So it seems as though he kind of passed out, really. Daniel was overtaken by this man, and in 4 through 6, we see kind of the description of him. Clothed in linen, belt of fine gold, body was like beryl, face was like lightning, eyes were like flaming torches, arms and legs like bruising bronze, sounds of his words were like a multitude. So this creature, whatever this being was that Daniel was seeing, was very intense. I mean, Daniel just was like, what in the world? Now, he's coming down from a 21-day fast, so he's naturally kind of, his body's in shock a little bit, but man, he really just, it's three times in like 2 sentences. He said, I lost my strength. I fell down and the strength ran from me and I couldn't feel anymore. And this creature had to actually touch him and be like, Daniel, in verse 10 through 12, it talks about a hand touched him and awoke him, trembling on his hands and knees. So it kind of gave him a little bit of composure, but he was still, he was not composed completely. And this man talked with Daniel and said that he was greatly loved and that God had heard his words. Man, how powerful that would have been. From a Daniel, this guy in captivity, learning the customs and the ways of these foreign people, and seeing one king, overthrown and another come up, and yet God was giving him favor in all these times. But just to hear this being just say, you know what, God has heard you, Daniel. You are greatly loved. You are greatly loved. And from the moment that you humbled yourself before God, your words were heard. All that Daniel had been through, all of the stress in the morning that he's going through, all the things that he's hearing as people will still have to go through, about the visions, they're not out of they're not out of this captivity yet. They still have to go through some more and more things, but all of this, and God finally, he sends a messenger and he says, Daniel, you are greatly loved. Man, just the power behind those words and the encouragement Daniel would have gotten from just hearing that being said would have been amazing. Would have overtaken him, honestly. And now, who is this guy? Who is this creature that appears for him? Obviously, there's really only 2 possibilities. This possibility is that this person is Jesus. Now, a lot of these actually really are confirmed when we look in Revelations. Jesus' eyes are like fire, and the burnished bronze is very similar. His face, with the lightning, with the clothes of fine linen. Now, it doesn't say he had like wool. It doesn't say a few things that are in Revelation. So we do have some differences. And obviously, the other idea of who this could be was an angel. Now, we're not given a name, so we can't speculate who this was, but it could have been an angel. And a lot of commentaries actually really pointed to that because of a few verses in a little bit. Okay, so we'll get to those. So it could have been Jesus, or it could have been an angel. We're not 100% sure. It leans both ways because of different reasons. So we'll get to the angel in a few verses. But in 10 and 12, the hand touched him, and he kind of was able to regain his composure just a little bit. But 13 and 14, this was he was held up. This creature, it said, let's read it in 13 and 14. It talks about the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. Now, honestly, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people think it's probably an angel. It just seems odd that Jesus would have been held up for 21 days. Now, Jesus didn't come down to earth and be as a man until a certain period. He wasn't raised up. Why did he stay on the earth? Not 35 years and not 30 or why was it 33? Why was all these? So it's not necessarily, you can't just throw out the idea it's not Jesus because, well, Jesus can't, be battling against something, because we know that he is an advocate to the Father. So who knows why this was happening, but that's a lot of the reasons why people think it was not Jesus, was because he was held up. And it seems as though Jesus would have been able to get past whatever this being was, this prince of the Persia. So, it could be both ways, but I'm open to both, honestly, for any reasons. But that is one of the reasons, though. But it says, it was held up for 21 days by this being called the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia. And then we see that Michael shows up. Now, Michael being, everyone was in agreement. This is Michael the Archangel. This would not have been any other Michael that we know of. One of the highest, forms of angel. It seems Michael's kind of popular, with Gabriel. He kind of does a lot of things. He is definitely a messenger, also a warrior, kind of used for God. We see him showing up a few times in the Bible. We don't know much about him, overall. We just know he's an archangel. And it seems as though God uses him for very specific tasks. And also a lot of times he's associated with kind of protecting the Jewish people in a way, from a few verses. But we see that whoever this being was, either Jesus or just another angel as a messenger was sent, that he came down and Michael was helping him basically defeat this king of the prince of the kingdom of Persia. And so when we see that, Michael was done that, and then with Michael helping him, this angel or Jesus, whoever this being was free to go on to Daniel and to give him the rest of this message. Now, the message is in chapter 11, so it's really just setting us up, but Michael seems to just fly in and just boom, is able to help this being with this prince of the kingdom of Persia. And so then they're freed up. And so in verses 13, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. For I was left there with the king of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision is for days yet to come. And so obviously this wasn't for the very, very present, but it was for some day in the future. But this really shows us a lot of things about, the spiritual realm. This shows us, and it would have showed Daniel as well, that there's a lot of things happening on that we can't see. And now we don't over spiritualize every single moment. If you're feeling rough one day, that's not necessarily Satan. That's not necessarily the devil. It could be, but we don't over spiritualize things. Angels have their place. We have ours. We're very different kind of beings from them. But we do know, even through here, and Daniel would have understood that, man, there's a lot of spiritual warfare that happens that is simply unseen to us. And Daniel is basically given this ability to see this being's telling him, hey, I've been fighting over the kings of Persia. I've been fighting a war, and Michael even had to come and help me because it was holding me up for 21 days. And so, always know that there is things that are happening that we cannot see, that we cannot understand. I'd encourage no one you don't seek after those things. You don't seek to see the demonic world, the angelic world. If those experiences happen, then they happen. But we seek first the kingdom of righteousness. We seek the Great Commission to go ye therefore and make disciples. So I would just encourage you, if you hear people talking like, I just see angels all the time. Here, every time we see an angel in the Bible, all of them terrify the people that see them, okay? Let's all establish that. There's not many times in the Bible where an angel appears and people are not, oh my goodness, and they lost strength and they pass out and they're fearful and they run and hide. All the times the angels are like, hey, fear not, I'm from the Lord. So, when you hear those people say, I see angels every day and they're awesome, they're beautiful and stuff, that's not really very consistent with what the Bible shows. A few times they do come as, kind of people or young man, it looks like, or, the people in the, at the tomb of Jesus was like two younger kind of men of some sort. But, so just take that in consideration, that this was definitely an angel. It definitely frightened him. The strength was out. But he was comforting Daniel. And Daniel would have known, man, there is some major spiritual warfare, spiritual battles that are happening in this world that we just can't see. but also that knows that God, it allows us to see that God is fighting for us. He says, He will never leave us nor forsake us, and His word is true, and He doesn't vary, He doesn't lie, He doesn't change His mind, and so God is constantly sending His own people, the angelic beings that He's created to fight, sometimes in our places. So we praise God for that, but. So in 15:16, though, knowing the spiritual warfare that was going on, Daniel, it seems like he kind of loses strength again. It says he bows his head. So he kind of just gives, oh my goodness, I can't believe all this is happening. It would have been a lot for someone to take in. And also the brilliance of this being, it's still this was still intense for Daniel, okay? And so... and then an angel appeared before Daniel and touched his lips then, and it allowed him to speak. And Daniel said that because he was seeing all of this, he had no strength. He said, "Look, all this, guys, whoever you are, this is intense for me. This is wild for me to see all this stuff. I can't, I'm having trouble speaking. My strength is out. I'm just having trouble with this." And so an angel touches his lips and allows him to start speaking again. And it seems that it helps him kind of regain a little bit of composure with himself too. So they're able to comfort us as well. And in Hebrews 14, Hebrews kind of 1. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 14 kind of talks about, how angels and us are different, we and Jesus. And, in Hebrews 1:14, it says, "Are they not all ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit the kingdom?" And so we know that, guardian angels and stuff, that kind of sometimes comes into play. That's not necessarily a super strict biblical view. I mean, but they definitely are sent to help us at times, and also to be messengers at times. So we don't pray to angels. They're not a deity. We have God. That's who we pray to. We don't pray to Mary. We don't pray to angels. We don't pray to other entities. We keep that very, over there. We don't do that. Okay. But they are sent to help us at times, and we praise God for that. So, and then 18 and 19 verses, the angel again touched Daniel and strengthened him. It kind of helped him regain all of his composure back and kind of finish that work of helping this guy out, seeing all this stuff. And the angel said to Daniel, "Fear not, peace be with you. Be strong and of good courage." And Daniel was encouraged by these words and regained some composure. In verses 20, it says, the angel was telling Daniel he has come to tell him something quickly. Then leave to continue the fight against these princes of Persia. And then it says, then after that, the prince of Greece will come. So it seems like there's these two not good beings, fallen angels, kind of a spiritual beings that were in play. That we don't fully know who these people were. We don't understand the concepts fully, but it seems like maybe these were fallen angels. Angels, we see that there's several classes of them. Seraphim and cherubim, and we see the archangels. We see these four creatures around the throne, praising God at all times. And so we don't know the classifications fully of what they do, but it does seem like they kind of have somewhat of a structure of jobs. And so if fallen angels, when they were led astray with Lucifer and they started following Lucifer, which now became Satan, it seems like maybe they fell into another series of jobs that usually they would have had, but they kind of kept that general idea that they were to create jobs for themselves. So maybe some of them took the places of being these special messengers to being messengers of evil to nations and kingdoms. So that's a lot of speculation, but we can kind of think that way a little bit. So. But he says, "Hey, I've come to deliver a message. I've been held up, but I'm going to deliver it quickly, and then I got to go fight the Prince of Persia again, and then I'm going to go fight the Prince of Greece." And so we see that these things are happening, and it just tells us, that there's a lot of spiritual warfare happening, and there's a lot of things that God is doing in the backgrounds for us, and definitely right here for the people of Israel and His own people. And that it seems that He's taking care of us, and so we can rely on God. He's doing things that we cannot possibly comprehend for us, and we just look to Him. And and it's not our job to even understand everything. You know, it's not our job to know how God is going to do every single thing in our lives at all times. Sometimes God wants us just to trust him, rely on him, okay? And but it ends up saying, you know, how the book of truth seemed to identify not with an actual book, but illustrating a formal statement. Let's read that verse, okay? It says in verse 21, verse 20, 21. But I tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these except Michael, your prince. And so we see that God's doing a lot of things in the supernatural realm, that he is going to be fighting for his own people. And I believe he continually does that today. So next week, we're going to get into actually what the angel said. Isn't it funny? I told you. 10, actually, nothing really happens in 10. Daniel gets overwhelmed by this vision, and they're about to say something. So I encourage you, read chapter 11 before you watch next Wednesday's video. And we'll see you next week. All right. Bless you.